This is Emily Hull with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Thursday, December 13th, 2018, and I'm in Pumpkin Hollow in Adair County, Oklahoma, on the Illinois River interviewing Faith Phillips for the Deep Roots Oklahoma Authors Oral History Project. Faith, you're the author of the novels Ezekiel's Wheels, Now I Lay Me Down, and the author of a collection of essays, It's Hard Not To. You're also my guide, our guide to these gorgeous foothills of the OOHRP Mountains. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
It's my pleasure. I'm really excited.
Me too. So where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Fayetteville, Arkansas. So basically still in the Ozarks. And both of my parents were from Adair County. Mm-hmm. And so I was born in Fayetteville, but raised in Proctor, Oklahoma, which is a really tiny, I like to call it a hamlet, just east of Tahlequah, about 15 miles east of Tahlequah. And it's surrounded by several bodies of water, including the Illinois River, a beautiful creek called Barren Fork. There's also a really small stream that kind of borders Proctor called Tyner Creek. And then there's also a creek called Peach Eater that's nearby. And so, as you were saying in your introduction, you said Pumpkin Hollow, which of course everyone around here says Pumpkin Holler. But just you can tell in Adair County. But people around, the names, even of the little creeks are so rich and almost magical to me that even as a child it inspired creativity.
Yeah. How would you describe the people around here?
I would describe the people around here as incredibly down to earth, hardworking, very, I think that the attributes probably would be most people are really family oriented. A lot of the people that came here that live here now are descended, especially in Adair, Cherokee counties in this area, are descended from Cherokees who were removed from the Georgia, North Carolina area in the 1800s, and the removal of the tribes from the east, basically the eastern part of the country, and then they made essentially a death march at gunpoint across the South in the winter, where all of these people died, and everyone knows this as the Trail of Tears. Right. So, which it really kind of blows me away that not everyone in the country knows about the Trail of Tears. But after I wrote the first book, it became clear to me that I made an assumption that everyone knew about this, and really not that many people know. And so I grew up in Adair County, where it was a story that everyone told their children, and it was taught in schools that this is a fact that these people were removed. And I probably romanticize it a bit, but I like to think that when the people on that long journey got here and they had lost so much and they had lost their homes and they came, I like to think that when they saw these hills and the water, that they thought, okay, we can raise our children here. We can make a living here. Yeah. That's what I like to think of. And so I think the people are survivors and they're really strong. You know, like my grandparents that are here in Adair County, my grandfather is probably, I think he's like 85. And I mean, he can throw tires. I mean, it's just, it's survivors here. So people that I think have a lot of deep empathy for suffering and for struggle, and descendants of survivors.
And do you think that history, along with the particular landscape of this part of Oklahoma, which is so different from, let's say, even in Stillwater, where I am, or the other side of the state, in the Panhandle, do you think that contributes to just the general character of people here, or what makes this part of Oklahoma and a different or unique compared to?
I think so. I think that that's a part of why the Cherokee people settled here is because you can if you need to, you can live off the land here. And so it's so different from the rest of Oklahoma because it's in the foothills of the Ozarks, and people still grow their own gardens. And I'm not saying that people in the rest of Oklahoma don't garden, but people here still can. And there are a lot of the old traditional ways that still live that have died off in other places. So I think that's also a part of the character, is that if they need to, and I really hate to get, I hate to sound like kind of canned, like Country Boy Can Survive, because although I do love that song,
it is a good one.
but the people here know how to live if they have to, if with very little resources, and that's pretty much how.
And they can.
Yes, they can. Fertile. It's not just some trend. They can feed themselves if they have to.
It goes way back. So you mentioned your grandparents a little bit. I wanted to talk a bit more about your family, but let's start with your parents.
Okay.
Start with your mom. So what's your mother's name, and what's she like?
My mother's name is Adair Phillips. She goes by Gail, and she's a beautiful person. She's definitely the rock of our family, and in the Cherokee tradition, you know, it's kind of a matrilineal society. She certainly holds the family together. I think without her, I think we would just be scattered in the wind. She's wonderful, and she's also a rules person. She follows the rules, and she works hard. I was born when she was just 16 years old. So I grew up when I was in my formative years. I grew up, my mom, after she had me, she decided she was going to go ahead and go to college. And so I grew up with my mom. She actually took me to college with her some days. I don't know if she wasn't able to secure a babysitter or what, but I do remember sitting in humanities class and then going home at night, and there's a book by Geoffrey Chaucer on the table. And so at, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, I'm reading Chaucer. So it's really strange and kind of not what you would expect in Adair County. But there was really high literature going on in my house when I was really young. And so my mom ended up getting a degree as a speech therapist. She's a speech pathologist. And then she went on to be a special services director. She's a professional. She's as good as it gets as far as speech therapy. She's at the height of the profession, I guess, is how you would describe it. And she's a huge influence on me.
How about your dad?
My dad is really wild.
What's his name?
My dad's name is Stan. And I think that that wild character to him is really what drew my mom to him, but they're really a strange pair, the two of them together, because he is not a rules person. In fact, you have to really show him that a rule matters and should be in place before he's going to follow it. And if he doesn't think that it's right, then he's not going to follow it. And that includes the law. So
does that cause tension with your mom?
Yes, absolutely. But it also draws her to him. So it's a really an interesting pair. And definitely, I mean, I have a memory, and I don't think he would mind me telling this story, but it's incorporated into the first novel. I have a memory of being in the truck with him when he ran from the cops. And so, like, it was dark, and he turned the headlights off and went down this side road so they couldn't catch him. And I don't know how old I was. I might have been 12. And I think to most people that would be a horrific story of child abuse. And to me, it's like the most fantastical, like, my dad was my hero, you know? It was like, so I think most parents would probably be ashamed by that, but I think that my dad would probably also be as delighted as I am to tell the story.
Yeah. So are you a rule follower? Or wild, or kind of have a mix of the two? You don't have to answer that.
Well, you might have to ask someone else about that.
Okay.
I think I'm a combo of the two. I definitely have a wild streak. I definitely I value my freedom.
Yeah.
So I don't want to have the same routine every day. I don't want anyone to tell me what to do. I don't want to have a boss. In fact, I've really had problems when I've had a boss in my life. But I also am a little bit of a prude. Because when I was growing up, my mom would say things like, little girls put their napkins in their lap at dinner. And I still do that to this day. And she would say, little girls don't climb through fences with a dress on. And I would think, what? And and now I'm like, oh, are my drawers showing? You know, so yeah, it's definitely a combination of those two things. And theirs is just a really delightful story. Everybody in the county, when she got pregnant with me at 15, said, oh, this is a disaster. This is never going to last, and they're never going to make it. And they've been married for 41 years, and I dare say maybe more in love today than they were 40 years ago. So it's a great story.
Yeah, it is. For sure. So you mentioned your grandparents a little bit. What were their names and what did they do, and when did they come to Oklahoma?
My dad's parents are Jiggs and Virginia Phillips, and Jiggs is they were both lifelong educators, Oklahoma educators. But Jiggs, after he finished his time as an educator, he went to serve the Cherokee Nation as a council person. So he was a council member for the Cherokee Nation, and his whole agenda was educating. He emphasized education for the Cherokee Nation. He definitely believed that a society can only be successful and survive if its people are educated. So that was huge to him, and he passed that on to the whole family. So we're all huge proponents for education. And my grandmother, my grandma Virginia, she was a school teacher and an excellent homemaker. So going to their house was just like, it was idyllic. You would walk in and there was always some wonderful smell coming from the kitchen, some kind of baked, cookies or something. And so their house was wonderful. And my mom's side of the family is Dub and Donnie Craig. And they still live in the same house that they had when I was born in Proctor. And my grandpa Dub, his actual name is just two letters, W-I.
W-I.
But he's known as Dub Craig. And he's been a cattleman his entire life. So he owns some land that's right down on Barren Fork Creek, which is basically the place where I grew up. And so we grew up right next to my mom's family. But I have Cherokee ancestors on both sides of the family.
Oh, okay.
And my grandma Donnie Craig. So my mom, Donnie Gale Craig, that's where that name came from. But she was the lifelong postmaster of the post office in Proctor, Oklahoma.
Really? Wow.
And in addition to that, she's a really talented cook. And so she cooks for Camp Egan for all the kids that come down in the summertime for church camp. She cooks for all those people, and she's a great cook. And that's one of the sad tragedies of my life, is that I never learned to cook like the women in my family. I guess because I was just too busy, in the living room sitting with the dudes, right. And they would bring me a plate of, but I just never learned how to cook, and that's a pathetic shame. I wish I would have.
Did they write down their recipes or?
Yeah. Yep. We have some books with recipes in them, so that's definitely a treasure.
Yeah. That can be your next project. So you have 2 sisters. Is that right? Yeah. Tell me about them.
I'm the oldest.
Okay.
Some of these stories. So I have the middle sister. Her name is Stacy. Her nickname is Boog. Mm-hmm. So you might recognize that name from my second book. It's not that hard to. And then the baby is Melissa, and she was born when I was 8. Mm-hmm. But the middle sister, Boog, she was born when I was just 11 months old. Mm-hmm. And there's this tragic story that I have to tell you about when Stacy came along, because I was born and it was kind of the apple of everyone's eye. And then when Stacy came along 11 months later, my grandma was keeping me at her house, and they tell this story that Stacy was the newborn baby, and Grandma was rocking her in the rocking chair, and she looked over, and I was 1 year old, and I was sitting on the couch rocking myself, which is the pathetic story I always like to tell everybody. I'm like, oh, I got kicked to the side when the new baby came. But I'm really close to my sisters. They're so weird. They're like some of the weirdest ladies you'll ever meet. And I mean, people think that I'm weird just based on my personality online. I love to laugh. I like to make people laugh. And I am a strange person. But, I mean, in my family, my sisters they blow me out of the water with how bizarre they are. And they're both artistic in their own way. My little sister, I really think she should probably be on Saturday Night Live. She's so funny. And she's got like this Judy Garland, like, Broadway persona. She can sing. She's got a beautiful voice. And so they're characters unto themselves, which is why they went in the book.
Yeah. How did they feel about you writing about them?
It's kind of a joke in the family now that they're like, well, be careful what you say when Faith's around, because she's probably going to put it in print. Yeah. Which is a weird dynamic to have in your family, because we're used to really giving each other hell and really having a good time and a good laugh. And I don't really think they censor themselves now, but that my sisters were thrilled to be in the book. And they're not really the most... it's really not the best stories. They're not really complimentary to them. Like, the first chapter is my baby sister streaking a golf course with these men who are having a party, and she's annoyed with them. So she streaks across to horrify them, to scare them, basically. And she does. And then the second story is about my middle sister, Boog, picking up this severed horse leg we found in the road. It's absolutely a true story. It really happened. And so when I thought, well, maybe they won't want people to know this. And when I sent them the rough draft, I wasn't asking for permission, because I never asked for permission. Yeah. I was just saying, this is probably what I'm going to put in my book. And they were thrilled. Really? They were so thrilled. Yeah. They weren't ashamed at all. And I think that goes back to Dad's character, where genuinely, I mean, people throw this around a lot. Oh, I don't care what people think of me. But that's a really hard thing to do. But my dad genuinely does not give a damn what anybody thinks of him. And so I think that in a sense, it didn't like completely transfer to my sisters and I, but there's an element of that. But, think what you want. I don't care.
Yeah. And it gives you some freedom.
Yeah.
So how would you describe your childhood self, your personality, hobbies, interests, your dreams for the future?
I was definitely in a dreamlike state most of my childhood. I had like a kind of pie in the sky type attitude, and I think most of that is because of books. They say that they found me reading the newspaper at age 2. I really don't know if that's true, but I do know that I was reading voraciously from a really young age, and they bought me a set of books for Christmas one year, and I had it. The entire set was read in a week, and I was actually washing the dishes, and I had the book propped up behind the faucet so I could read while I was washing dishes. So I was obsessed, and I think I was obsessed with books and reading. And I think that instilled in me a sense of adventure.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never really in reality. I was always in this dreamlike state because of the books. And I would take walks down, the country lanes and find I had a place, I called it my secret place.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this little pond with a log had fallen across, and there were tadpoles flitting around in the water. And I would just go there and sit there and just stare off into space and daydream. I mean, I was a really weird kid.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask the middle sister, she's like, oh, we had a hard childhood because we didn't have much money. But I didn't. To me, it was a wonderful childhood. I mean, I didn't care that we didn't have a big house or we didn't have things. I was happy. I was living a dream.
Is there a particular book that stands out to you from childhood, or?
It just so happens I brought it today.
Yes, all right.
But Island of the Blue Dolphins was one of my very favorites. And I haven't looked back on it in a long time, so I would really like to read it again. But I just remember the fantastic idea of being a girl, being alone. Some tragedy has happened and you have to look after yourself. Mm-hmm. You have to be on your own and take care of yourself. And that was fantastic to me. Mm-hmm. It was like, ooh, maybe I'll get stranded on a deserted island someday, So that was just one of those books that fed into that. And I really loved Little House on the Prairie. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading where, it's the controversial part these days about how she writes about the native tribe that was around when they were settling in wherever they were, Kansas or whatever, and they were having a powwow, so they were dancing and basically worshiping religiously in their way. But from Laura Ingalls Wilder's perspective and her family's perspective, these are the savages that are going to come murder them, in their home. And I remember reading that thing and what, these people are ignorant, because at that point I'd already been to the powwows, and when I hear, even today, when I hear that beat, when I hear the songs, it drums something up in my blood. It's on a DNA level.
Yeah. That blood memory.
Yeah. But I thought those were wonderful books. I loved those books. And then really inappropriate material. At age 12, I was reading Stephen King. And so he's a huge, huge influence in my writing. Always has been.
What's your earliest memory of writing something that was creative?
In the first grade, I wrote a book. It was really a pamphlet. But I wrote a fiction called Grandma and the Gnome.
Oh.
Grandma and the Water Gnome.
And the Water Gnome. Okay.
I don't know where I came up with the conception of a water gnome, but they published it at Westville Public Schools, and as far as I know, it's still in the library.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my first published book was in the first grade.
What's it about?
I don't remember a whole lot of details other than the water gnome took Grandma down into the well.
Oh.
So I had to go save Grandma from the water gnome in the well. And so my first fiction thriller.
That's good. What was your favorite subject in school? And are there any memories from elementary school or junior high or high school that kind of stand out?
My favorite subject in school was definitely English. And I made really good grades because I had, this might have been better in the earlier section about where I grew up, but I think because of my immersion in literature and everything, I spent the whole time I was growing up plotting how I was going to get out of Adair County. So I was like, I got to get out of here. I'm going to make a success of myself, and then I'm going to take care of my family. So I had like this vision of I was going to make a lot of money and have like some big ranch where my family lived and take care of everyone. That was my vision. So, in high school, I loved English, and that was like my best class, A+ all the way. But I also made A's in calculus, and we don't really know how that happened, other than the fact that I told the calculus teacher really great stories every day, and he really liked me. So I have to say I think he was very judicious in giving me, or maybe generous is the right word, in giving me an A in calculus, because I'm so bad at math. And but so I can remember being in English and in English class, and the teacher gave me Shakespeare. So that was just, I was already this big time reader, and that just kind of put me over the top as far as high literature is concerned, with Romeo and Juliet. And while most of the other kids in class were moaning because it was so miserable for them to read, I was like, ooh, I was just so excited and delighted by this new material. And she encouraged me to write about the Girl Scout murders, which happened 2 years before I was born. So I think it was 1976. And for whatever strange reason, I guess because I was a weird kid, I was really obsessed with that story. I had read everything I could get my hands on. There was some interesting documentary that was made, I think maybe in the 80s, that was like kind of corny, but it was also really compelling. And Johnny Cash was the narrator. And it told the story, this really mysterious story that still remains unsolved to this day. And I was just so obsessed with it. So I wrote this lengthy essay. And so my English teacher came to one of my book signings. And
really?
Yes. And I call every time I see her, she's come to several. And I always call her out in front of everyone and say, this is a woman who really recognized my passion for literature and writing, and really encouraged me early on, and acknowledge her. And she, one of the first ones she came to, one of the first book signings she came to, she got kind of teary-eyed, and she was like, remember that essay you wrote about the Girl Scout murders? So even, 20 years later, however long it was, 25 years later, she remembered me, which I thought was amazing. There's no telling how many students crossed her path, how many papers she read, but she remembered the Girl Scout murders. So that was good. That was encouraging.
You, and still was able to come out and support you.
Meant a lot.
Yeah. So tell me about your educational path after high school. Did you go straight to college, or
Well, I did get that big scholarship that I was thinking was going to change my life and make me, I'd go on to my big corporate success or whatever I was going to do. And my freshman year, I had an English professor at OU. I got a full scholarship from the Phillips Petroleum Company to be a petroleum engineer. So I was like, I'm going to get in the oil business and make a lot of money. And then my freshman year, I had an English professor. And by that time, I think it was my second semester, I had already decided that I was probably going to go to law school. And my English professor was like, you do not, I think it was creative writing. He said, you do not need to waste your time at law school. You're a writer. You're always going to be a writer, and you're not going to be anything else. And I just thought, whatever, because I felt like authors. I thought of Stephen King. I thought, so being an author to me was like being a movie star. Like, it was not in my realm of options. I knew I was a writer, but I never imagined that I would be an author.
Right.
That
to
was
make a living.
Just too far beyond my possibilities. But this guy recognized right off the bat, just from being in his class. He pretty much told me my future, and I just blew him off.
Mm-hmm.
So then I went on to law school at OU and graduated from law school and with a law degree, and started practicing in-house corporate law. So I was working for a pretty big corporation in Oklahoma that manufactured oil, like equipment for the oil field, so vac and frac tanks. And I was their in-house attorney.
Oh, okay.
So kind of strange, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And how long did you practice?
I think 8 years.
8 years.
I think. Yeah.
Then what happened?
That's an interesting story.
Yeah.
That's a good story and kind of a long one. But so the company I was working for, I was writing in all my spare time. So when my son went to go be with his father for the weekend, I was writing. At night, anytime I had free time, I was writing. And so this company sold to a bigger corporation. They were taken over. And so I had been working basically as an HR person, as a compliance officer. I was making sure we were following the law. We weren't polluting the environment. We were, and so this new company came in and they had this, I don't know what you call him. He was like he was the get her done guy. And he conducted himself like that. You know, these types, they come in and they're like, I'm the dude and I'm going to get it done.
Yeah.
And so they started treating all of these people who I'd made a personal relationship with. They were employees. They were my colleagues, and they were welders, and they were hard workers. And this guy came in and started treating them like they were trash. I mean, talking to them like they were trash. And I had spent all this time building up a relationship with these people, and I couldn't. They wanted to keep me on as their in-house attorney, and I couldn't tolerate it. It made me sick to think about going to work for this person, and he would have been my boss. And so I just everything kind of came to a culmination of I had been writing. I really had this idea. I thought the idea for Ezekiel's Wheels had already been born. I'd been working on it. And I came to a point where I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm not going to spend my life like this in a place where I'm miserable. And I'm like, I couldn't sleep at night.
Yeah.
Thinking about these people and how they were being treated. So I just had a discussion with my son, who at that point, you know, he had the life of a child of an attorney. So he had whatever he needed. I'm not saying that we were wealthy, but we didn't have any needs whatsoever. I paid all the bills. I, brought home the bacon. I did everything. And I was kind of proud of that, as a single mom, that my son had everything he needed. So my son was also kind of literary minded. He had read Tolkien. By then he was probably 10 or 11. And I sat down with him and I said, you know what, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to pursue my passion for writing. I'm going to be an author. And he was pretty excited about it. And I said, we're going to move back home to Adair County where, and he had become a little bit of a city boy. I mean, he had kind of grown up in Norman. And so he was pretty citified. And I was like, don't worry, it's just going to take a year. And I really believed it. I don't know why or how, but in my mind, I thought, I can do this in a year. My book will come out. It'll blow up. And I'll keep writing. And we'll never have another financial worry. So I said, you're just going to have to sacrifice for a year. And he was excited. He was happy to come back here because we had been here so many, every summer and every break we would come back to see the family for holidays and things. And so he loved it back here. He was all on board. And so we packed up a U-Haul and moved back to Adair County, where I moved in with my baby sister, who had just bought a little little hobby farm. And I just started, I mean, I'd already had the skeleton of Ezekiel's wheels basically written out. And so I was working on, I spent a year writing Ezekiel's wheels. And here we are. Yeah. 10 years later. Yeah. The day we moved, we pulled up in the U-Haul was the day of the 80-year flood. Oh. As the old timers call it around here. So we were moving everything I owned in the middle of a pouring rain. Oh. So yeah, kind of a dramatic tale. And that also coincided with I had made a trip to Africa.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, it's actually kind of a religious experience. I felt a calling to go. I never intended, that was not something that was in another thing that was not in my plans, but I saw this preacher had put up a display of what they had been doing in Malawi. And I was interested, and then he said, if I just ask that you listen to yourself, and if you feel a calling, then come to the meeting and just hear about it. And I was like, sitting out thinking, yeah, right. And then when he said, listen, and if you feel the calling, then just come learn about it. That's when I actually felt like a physical push of you need to go. And I was like, whoa, no. I'm a single mom. I have a really important position in a company where I'm needed to make sure that we don't get hit with some huge fine from the government. I was like, there's no way I can go spend 2 weeks in Africa. But I honored that little voice where he said, just listen. And it coincided with when the company was being passed over into the big corporation. And so I went to Africa, and it really changed my life. That whole time I was leaving, I knew I was leaving my job. I knew that I was going back to depend on my family. I felt a little bit of a failure, that I wasn't going back here to take care of my family. I was coming back for my family to take care of me. Yeah. So I felt like I had failed. I was concerned about financial issues. I was concerned about having a house of my own. And then I went over to Africa, and they had this little boy who walked with me everywhere I went. His name was Chisomo. And he carried my bags, which I was humiliated about, and I begged him not to. But he wanted, he was like, "Oh no, I'm going to go with you everywhere you go." And he's telling me these things through a translator because he didn't speak English. He insisted on carrying my bags, and my bag probably weighed 30 pounds. So I was just so horrified that this sweet little boy was carrying my bags. And I was talking to this large group of children, and I was basically in my own way telling the story of the parable of the lost sheep. So I'm saying, and this is a true story, I had a few chickens, and I named all the chickens after rock stars. So I had Goose Springsteen, and Goose Springsteen was an actual goose, but I had the one rooster I had was called Mick Jagger, and he was this white rooster. So he ran off, he got lost, and I left all the other chickens to go chase after Mick Jagger. So I'm telling this story to this group of children in Africa, which is bizarre enough to begin with, and all the kids are laughing because it's supposed to be a funny, lighthearted story. I'm like, I went chasing a rooster named Mick Jagger through the woods, so that's pretty funny. And all the kids are laughing except Chisomo, my little buddy who's been carrying my bag, and he looks so distraught, and I couldn't understand what he was upset about. And then it came time to go, and all the village had gathered around, and I was getting in this van. It was very emotional, and I'd spent two weeks of my life that something I'd never, like nothing I'd ever experienced before. My life was changed. And I'm trying to find Chisomo to tell him goodbye. You know, I have to tell him goodbye. I can't leave without. And then it's like in a movie, you know, the crowd parted, and here comes this little boy, and he's carrying this, like the most beautiful rooster I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was like feathers were iridescent. It was they've been making sure this rooster has been eating. He's a healthy, and you don't see very many animals out there at all, basically. So obviously this rooster was going to be somebody's meal. And the family, they don't have much to eat. They hardly have any water. And this little boy and his family decided to give me a chicken. You know, I mean, and so it changed everything. And I came back and I looked at everything that we had, our family, and I was just like, I don't need anything. I can give my life to art. So sorry about that.
No, that's
it's
okay.
A very emotional story for me, because
is.
it was like the moment when everything changed for me.
So had you finished your first novel at this time, and were you trying to make a living from it, and is that when everything was just solidified, and no matter the highs or the lows?
I had already been working on Ezekiel's Wheels, but I hadn't finished it yet.
Oh, okay.
So when I came back was when I really was like, okay, now I've really got to finish this. And so it was, I think, that October. So I had gone to Africa in June, and I'd already started Ezekiel's Wheels, and then I finished it, I think, in that same October, in, I believe it was 2011, I think.
Do you tell our listeners a little bit about Ezekiel's Wheels? What's the story? And there's also this great art behind you.
That's a good story too.
Yeah.
Am I okay? Okay. I'm sorry I got so teary. I didn't expect to do that.
Well, it's an emotional story. You know, I heard you read that last year at the literary festival in Tonkawa.
So you've heard it a couple of times.
It's moving. I mean, whether you're reading it, I mean, just when we think about what it's like to devote ourselves to something that might or might not put food on our table or pay the bills, but we do it anyway, and we see this contrast and how other people it just changes your perspective, I think, when you travel like that.
And also the crazy thing about it was that they had so much joy. The families that I met in Malawi, they had nothing. I mean, they were actually living in mud huts, and they had such joy and love for each other, and love for a stranger who just came over there. So that's what really struck me, was that the things are not going to make you happy. And so that was a good realization to have at that age, because I had been working and with the purpose of making money to have things. And that was a real eye-opener, that the things are not gonna give you what you need to be fulfilled in life. And so Ezekiel's Wheels is, I called it a fiction thriller, for a lack of a better term, at the time when it came out. But it's this strange combination of legends that I've heard, and also it's really kind of like a time traveling book, because it goes back and forth in time. And it starts out, you're in the modern day, current time, and there's this woman, Shell, who's in a bad relationship, and she's trying to get out of it, but she doesn't quite know how she's gonna get out of this relationship without causing a scene or having
Right.
some major issues. And then it also jumps back and forth between her ancestor who's coming over on the Trail of Tears. So it's telling a story of her great-grandmother. And in the end, both of those stories merge in a supernatural kind of way. And it incorporates the story of the Spook Light, which is one of the many legends that I've heard sitting around the campfire here in Oklahoma that obviously stayed in a prominent place in my brain, just kind of simmering there, waiting. And so I had already been writing, and it was 2008. I was driving in my Jeep from a concert with my family in Tulsa, and I heard this radio show with Steve Ripley, who's this famous guitarist in Oklahoma. He's from Oklahoma. He was talking about Oklahoma rock and roll and the legacy of the music here in Oklahoma. And he played this song from Leon Russell's Will o' the Wisp, and it was like magic. This entire story, that like the outline of it, just popped in my brain like magic. I mean, like I'm actually driving down the road and writing out the outline of how this novel is going to go. And so that was the beginning. That was 2008. And then, of course, you know, I was just writing on the weekends or when I had free time. So it took 3 years until Ezekiel's Wills came to life in 2011. So it was a 3-year, but I wasn't writing, you know, every day, obviously, just when I could.
Yeah. So the painting behind you is the cover art for that book.
Yes, it's so cool,
isn't
it? I love it. It's really special to me. And I was talking to my sister about this book, and there had been some really strange things surrounding. So, like, I was sitting with my sister in Jinx, Oklahoma. So we're basically in the middle of the city, and I'm telling her the outline for my book, the story of how it's going to go. And these owls, which are in the book, but these owls in Jinx start calling to each other, like, and there was like at least 5 of them. It was like surround sound owls. We were sitting outside around a fire, and I'm telling her the story of my book, and these owls start calling back and forth to each other, and I was like, whoa, that's so weird. So I was talking to her about my cover art, and I felt like I'll know it when I see it. So I was looking, and I was searching for something that would represent the Spook Light, because the Spook Light is really kind of what propels that story forward. Shell in Ezekiel's Wills is going to find the Spook Light. She wants to see the legendary Spook Light. And so I was looking for art that had a Spook Light in it, and I couldn't find anything. And a lot of it was really cheesy, and so my sister said, well, why don't you try this artist, this painter in Tahlequah? And so I was really doubtful, and we showed up there, and it was Merv Jacob. And Merv is just this character in and of himself. He's really funny. He's very animated. And I didn't have the nerve to ask him, could you do a painting of the Spook Light for me? But my sister, Merv, I told him I'd written a book, and I told him really the main connection, I think, was my grandfather. He knew my grandpa Jiggs, who had served on the Cherokee Council, and he highly respected him. So I said, I've written a book. I don't have any money to pay you. But I'm looking for a cover for my book. And he said, have anything. Look through all of my paintings. You can have anything you want for your book, which was so incredibly generous. Well, my middle sister, Boog, Stacy, she's got so much more nerve than I do. And she said, no, we want you to paint an original. And he said, how much money do you have? She said, I can go get 100 out of the ATM. And he just laughed. He just started laughing because, you know, this thing is worth thousands of dollars.
Yeah, that's a big piece.
You can't commission an original piece of artwork for $100.
Right.
But so he thought that was hilarious. And then he said, okay, tell me in in just a few words, tell me what your book is about. What's your book? He didn't want to hear the whole story. He doesn't have time. His brain's working too fast. Just tell me in a few words what your book is about. And I said, eerie. Eerie is the best word I can give you to tell you what my book's about. And Merv goes, Erie? I was born on the banks of Lake Erie. My middle name is Erie. I'm Merv Erie Jacob. He was just like, started riffing off on it. And then I went back a week later. I stopped by his studio, and he had like anatomy books of owls out, and he was studying it, you know, like Leonardo da Vinci or something weird like that. And he was sketching out the owls. And then when I went back, I think it took him 3 weeks. I went back 3 weeks later, and I saw that, and I just cried because I knew as soon as I saw it, I knew that was the cover for my book. And it's just magical. Every time I look at it, I'm just like, oh, I can't believe that's mine.
Yeah, it's a great story. What was it like publishing that book and kind of moving from the artistic endeavor to you're trying to make a living from your art?
Well, it didn't work out anything like I'd planned.
Yeah.
I was just writing the book, and I didn't know anything about the publishing world. I didn't know how to get in. So someone had said, oh, I read Stephen King's On Writing, which is a wonderful book that I would recommend to everyone. It's maybe a little bit dated now as far as the advice, but it's so good. So he had suggested getting the Writer's Digest. So I got that, and I sent out query letters. I sent out writing samples. And I did that. I spent about a month on that with the first book. And as far as I could tell, and as far as I know to this day, I don't think anyone ever read a word of what I sent them.
Yeah.
I really don't think anyone read any of it. And I had spent, you know, how much energy it takes to put together an individualized query letter and all of that stuff to try and get a publisher. And in that book On Writing, Stephen King had said, if you're good enough, you're going to get published. Somebody's going to discover you eventually if you're good enough. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm good enough, so somebody's going to discover me. And then not a word. I mean, it was depressing.
Yeah.
And I'm an impatient person. I don't like to wait. Also, like my dad, if the rules aren't working for me, I'm probably going to throw them out the window. So after that, I just said, screw the publishers, screw all of it. I'm going to do it myself. And to my detriment, I think, in some ways. But I didn't have time or patience to go the traditional route anymore. And so I went through Create Space and started my own book tour with Ezekiel's Wills. And I even went to I went to New Jersey and New York and Philadelphia, and went to all these places to sell Ezekiel's Wills, which I could not justify the cost of that, but I did it.
Yeah.
And so from that experience, that's pretty much the way I've been going forward now with the third book. I've been contacted by some agents, and with the second book, a publisher was interested. But
that was your essay collection.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
It's hard not to.
Yeah, my essay collection, and that is the one that tells a lot of the Africa stories. But by that time, I'd already gotten used to doing things my way.
Right.
I was already really used to being very poor. So unless someone had a really outstanding offer for me, I was not interested in turning over control to anyone else. And I still haven't. And I'm not saying I'm ruling that out, because I think probably almost all writers would like to have that stamp of being official, of saying, yeah, publishing house, pick me up. But so far, I've enjoyed keeping it to myself.
Yeah,
and
something
and remaining the outsider, which I relish the role in at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, I've applied for, the Tulsa Fellowship and things like that. So I say I'm an outsider, and I really relish that role. But I also really relish being acknowledged as a writer, because that's something that, I don't know, you just want to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
And so that's nice when it happens.
We all do. And with your third book, Now I Lay Me Down, I'd like to spend some time talking about this. So first of all, this is a chilling story. It's a true story. Kind of tell me about why you chose to write this particular story, maybe fill the listeners in on what happened and why this.
Okay. With Ezekiel's Wheels, I always considered myself a fiction writer. Mm-hmm. And so it's really strange how nothing's worked out to plan, just like the rest of my life.
Sure.
But I went to law school with this girl who I really connected with. And I think we connected because we shouldn't have connected, because at that time I was going through the worst time of my life. I was going through a divorce. Mm-hmm. I just had to move out of my house with my 2-year-old son. I was living in a junker place and going to law school, and I was broke, and I met this girl, and I probably shouldn't have hit it off with her, because at the time she was just falling in love and everything was wonderful in her life, but we connected. And I think it's because we were both country girls who came from families who had struggled in the past. And she had this really strong country accent. And she also had a really kind of a wicked sense of humor, which I love.
Yeah.
And her name's Maxie Riley. And so we had a good time. I wouldn't say we were like best friends, but we really cared about each other. But you know how it is in life. You make these connections, and then life changes and you go your separate ways. Well, we did that. We had lost touch. We lost connection with each other. And I had already gone after my writing dream. And I made the horrible decision to try and sell books at a music festival, which is the Woody Guthrie Music Festival in Okemah. And so I rented a booth so I could sell my books there. And I ran into Maxie at the Woody Guthrie Festival. And we were both like, what are you doing here? Catching up. And she was just kind of blown away that I had turned away from the law, the law career, and turned to a life of the arts. She was like, well, alrighty. But I mean, she didn't judge me, but she was just like, wow. And then she brought all of her friends over to buy my books. I think she kind of felt sorry for me, really. And I learned that she had been the district attorney in OOHRP County. And we were so delighted to see each other, and we had such a great time together that we made plans a couple months later to meet on the Illinois River. So we went, I think it was September, we met on the Illinois River for like we called it girl camp, set up some tents, and she was like, I've got a story for you. You're writing books. I can tell you a story. And I thought, whatever. Because
get that a lot.
You do. Yeah. People are like, hey, you should write a book about this, which is great. And I really think most people do probably have a book-worthy life, but you can't write them all.
Right.
And so I just thought, oh boy, here we go again. And then she started telling me this crazy, tragic, unbelievable story with so many twists in it that you wouldn't believe that it was true. And that she, my friend Maxie, had been directly involved in it, that she was there had been these murders in Waletka, Oklahoma. 2 little girls had been shot as they were walking down a country road, just like I did when I was a little girl, walking down the dirt road, going to my secret place and dreaming. And I mean, somebody just came along and shot both of them, just shot them dead. And she was a prosecutor. She was the assistant district attorney when that happened. She had just started. She was untested. She had no idea really what. And she ended up prosecuting the crime. And when she told me, I mean, like, really, my hair stood on end. And I was like, yeah, that's a book. Yes, that story is a book. And I will write it. Because I was already, in my mind, it was going to be my next fiction, would be my third book. And then this one just kind of came out of the blue and insisted that I write the story. I felt like it's one of those situations where I didn't really feel like I was in control. I really kind of felt like I had been plucked up and given the responsibility of telling the story, which was not something that came from my head like Ezekiel's Wheels. It was a story that was already done.
Yeah.
I just had to tell it. And I didn't really know quite how to do that without being exploitative of the families and the victims. And as I started looking into it and researching it, it became very clear that the only way that I could tell the story without exploiting the families was to tell it from the point of view of the prosecutor, my friend that I had been in law school with, who's now Judge Riley. She's the youngest associate district judge in the state of Oklahoma. So I'm really proud of her.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really an amazing story and a tragedy. And the only thing that I think makes it really worthy of being in print, because I really don't like to give service to something that is that tragic. But there is the story of Maxie, I think, is what makes it, because like the little girls who were murdered, she started off in a struggling family. She was a country girl. She loved to hunt and fish. She loved walking the dirt roads. She loved animals, and just like the little girls who were murdered. So I found that the fact that she came around and prosecuted the man who took those little girls' lives, and also his fiance later in 2011, I thought that that's what made it book worthy, was that there was a little country girl that brought justice to the little girls that were lost.
Yes, and your attention to detail and the research that you did for this. So you used transcripts from court. You interviewed people, right? How did you go about? I mean, it's nonfiction, but we're always characters in our work, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It's trickier with the nonfiction. How did you balance that to stay true to the people, to try not to offend, but at the same time not censor how you wanted to say things?
Well, I had some experience already in Ezekiel's Wheels with writing about what this place looks like. I wanted to be able to paint a picture for the reader to see what I saw in this. I mean, it's such a natural beauty that, and I've been lucky to have traveled a lot in my lifetime, and there's some natural beauty in Oklahoma that I would put side by side with the most beautiful places I've ever seen in the world. I mean, Oklahoma has, and so it's a character in and of itself.
Right.
The environment. Oklahoma is a character in the book. So I want the person, if they're in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I want them to read this chapter and be able to see in their mind, like a movie, what this dirt road looks like that you're driving down. And so I'd already had some experience with describing this area in Ezekiel's Wheels, and I employed those tools for Now I Lay Me Down, which it's kind of a strange combo, because I'm telling a true story, and absolutely everything in that book is taken from, I went through thousands of pages of transcripts of depositions and pretrial work, and then of course I spent hours and hours with Judge Riley, interviewing her about that experience of what it was like to prosecute the crime. And I corresponded with a few letters with the convicted murderer as he was in McAllister. So it was definitely a strange, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I had never written like that before. Definitely not in my plans. But, and then of course I had to read every single press, everything that was ever written about it, which thousands and thousands of pages, because
it went on for so long. It was a hard case to
it went on for
too.
so long, and then it was in the national headlines,
right?
Because it was so bizarre, and people just become wrapped up in that kind of drama. So it was difficult, but I really it was difficult piecing it together. But in some ways it was a lot like Ezekiel's wheels in that I made the skeleton of the outline. So I basically had all these chapters. I knew how many chapters. I knew the order that I wanted it to go in. So so then once I would come up with the material, I would know, okay, this is part of the investigation. This goes in the investigation chapter. This is the dad's account of when he discovered the little girls in the ditch. This goes in the murder chapter, the actual chapter that details how the little girls were killed. And then, there was the way the whole crime was solved was because of the firearm. Yeah. And so then I just kind of did I would say that maybe Herman Melville influenced this part where I just have one chapter that's completely out of context. It doesn't flow. It's the life of the gun. So it's just this weird chapter that talks about where the gun was born, how it came to be in Waleetka, and, so it's kind of like a weird riff off to the side. But
it ties in.
It's the key.
Yeah, with how Kevin Sweat, right?
Yeah, it's really kind of like the code that solves the whole thing.
So, would you consider this, and I think this is your term, right? Okie noir.
Yes.
And what do you mean by that? What's Okie noir?
Okie noir, to me, it works on several levels. I think Oklahoma is this strange place where it really is a creative engine for artists because there's such a dark history. Like I was talking about what happened to the Cherokee and the other tribes who were brought here in this horrific genocide. But the people came here and they survived, and the people who made it here survived, and their children are pairing with other people who've also been through tragedy. The Dust Bowl, we've had to leave and go to California and work to feed our families back home. I mean, there's just all this really dark history. The outlaws sought shelter here in the hills. Right. So it's just a very dark and very rich and very inspiring place. So it's like this inspiration comes from tragedy and struggle. And I think that's where Bob Dylan has a line behind everything beautiful. There's been some kind of pain. And so I think that's where a lot of Oklahoma's beauty comes from, is from a really a place of tragedy and pain and surviving it.
Yeah.
I think that's what Okie Noir means.
Yeah.
And then also, my dad grows grapes, and Pinot Noir is one of my favorite wines.
Yeah.
So there's that tie-in to my dad's winemaking.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a term of endearment, and I'm not sure when it came to mind. But I think that all three of my books fit in that.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing, really, to say I named my genre.
Well, but Oklahoma, and this is something that I explore in this whole series, and I usually ask the question kind of in a different way, but you already kind of got at it, and we're a place of contradiction. There's immense kindness here, but we can also be an awfully mean people at the same time. Our landscape is so varied. Our history, I mean, it's just layer upon layer of tragedy and pain and erasure and, kind of resurrection, for lack of
like the phoenix out of the ashes.
Or just thinking of, places like Greenwood and that history. We have all of these hidden histories.
Yes.
That some people remember and then others
And I find that so interesting too, that sometimes the truth is completely upside down from what the official story is.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really interested in too, is, so, they call it I just read, I think last week, about the Tulsa race riots, and that they're changing that terminology. And I think that's important. If society at large has been propagating this lie, then when anywhere you can, I think it's the job of the artist to turn it upside down on its head and say, no, that's not the truth. This is the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and getting to our contradictions as people too. So I'm going to go back to Kevin Sweat. So this person who killed 2 little girls and his fiance, you know, you could have portrayed him as very easily just as this one-dimensional villain, but that wasn't the case in your book. Kind of talk to me about how you kind of made him a layered and a 3-dimensional person.
I owe that to his friend, and she's also an Oklahoma artist. Her name's Anna Film. She's a sketch artist, and she's very talented. And I just came across her name in the court records and also in the interviews with Judge Riley. And I wanted to talk to her because I just felt like I couldn't find very much background information on Kevin. And like everybody else, I wanted to know why. Why did you do this? What happened? Something had to have happened. And I just really felt this strong curiosity. I didn't want to bother his mother. I didn't want to talk to his family. For selfish reasons, I think. I tell myself it's because I didn't want to bring them any more pain, but truly it would have been very uncomfortable for me as well to say, I'm writing a book about what your son did. You know, just don't want to have that conversation. So I met with his friend, Anna Film, and she was friends with Kevin and Ashley, and she's actually in the book. And she was just so real. Maybe the realest person I've ever met in my life. And she just said, you know, that they both had a rough upbringing. They both had a rough childhood. And that Kevin had kind of idealized himself as an outsider, as a loner. And that's what the identity that he chose for himself, and that he was not a bad person, which that's a hard thing to hold in your head. But I knew she was being truthful to me. So you want to just nail this person down because that's the easiest way. It's your human nature. You want to be able to say, okay, this is what this guy did. This makes him a terrible person. This justifies his lifetime imprisonment. And you want to put it in a neat box and put it away. Because it's too hard to think that it might be a little bit more complicated than that. But the fact is that life is complicated. And there are very few things that we can put in a box and file away. And that was the case with Kevin Sweat. And I'm careful to say that I had empathy for him. But some of the stories that I heard, I did. I felt sorry for him. And I felt sorry that he felt so alone. I felt sorry that he didn't feel like he could have any friends. And even his own family, you know, that he couldn't be himself even with his own family. And so I just wanted, it was too easy to make him the evil one in the book. I wanted to make it more of a challenge for the reader because I recognize if you're reading books, you're probably a pretty intelligent person that can handle that kind of a concept. So that's where I went, and I had corresponded with him in prison, and I had explained to him that I was a writer. I also told him that I was a lawyer, but that I had absolutely no interest in helping him get out of prison because I felt like I had to be brutally honest to him. And he wrote this really long letter, and it was really a little bit bizarre. I felt like when I reached out to him the first time, that I was opening up a line of communication to someone that I probably didn't want to open myself up to, but I felt it was necessary for the book. And so then when he wrote back, he said my name over and over again in the letter. He probably said Faith I would guess at least 30 times in a 7-page letter. He would say, "in faith," which is kind of a psychological ploy I've learned to making someone think, to connecting to someone. You say their name. And so that gave me the chills, and I could tell that he was setting me up to tell me that he didn't kill the 2 little girls, but that he did kill his fiance. And I could tell he was setting me up for that. So the next letter I wrote back was even more candid than the first. And I said, "I need you to understand that I am writing a book, and I'm going to tell the truth, whatever that is. If I find something that makes me think that you didn't do this, I'll put it in there. But I haven't found that. And I'm going to tell the truth of what I find." And he never wrote back after that. So I got the impression that he felt like he could maybe use me as a tool, perhaps to get out of prison. And I had to make sure he knew that that's not what I was there for. Because in a way I was using him for material for my book. So I couldn't lie.
Yeah, and people, we were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording about how people, when you go and do book signings or give a talk about this particular book, how people react to it. What are some of the reactions that you've experienced that maybe have surprised you or caught you off guard?
I think the first event was the one that really set the standard, because the first big book signing was in Okemah, and I had spent these months interviewing these people, and then I wrote a book about them. And I didn't paint them in the most glorious light. I wrote about the poverty. I wrote about the meth problem, which is not just in Okfuskee County, but is in all of Oklahoma. And anyway, I could go on about that. But one of the little girls, the grandpa, Pete, who is in chapter 3, he found the little girl shot dead in the ditch. He came to the book event. And he came, and I had planned to read that section where he finds the little girls dead in the ditch to the audience.
And that's a gut-wrenching.
It is. I mean, when I read it out loud to my dad, he was the first person I read it out loud to, I was amazed. I couldn't get through it without weeping. It was a rainy day like today, and I was reading it to him, and I just kept weeping. I couldn't get my composure. So, the Pete came up to me before I took the stage, and he said, "Thank you for telling my girl's story." And then he said, "But chapter 13 was pretty rough, and that's the chapter that has the autopsy in it." Or maybe it's chapter 11. Anyway, he said that was really rough, and there was nothing I could do but other than to say thank you for being so generous, because he could have shown up and boycotted me, and he could have been with all rights, for drumming this up 10 years after, maybe they're just now starting to heal. I don't know if you can heal from that pain, but maybe they're just starting to come back to some semblance of a normal life, and hear this writer.
With all this attention.
Yes.
ABC and.
Exactly. It's kind of gross. It really is. And so for them to be so gracious with me is something I could never repay. But I asked him, I said, I do plan to read from chapter 3. And I know that's some really difficult material. And if you'd rather I didn't, I won't. And he said, "It'll be okay." And when I read it, I mean, it was the biggest book event I've had. It was in a huge room. And when I read that portion, everybody in the room knew that the Placker family was there. You could have heard a pin drop. I mean, it was just so emotional. And I held it together. I got through the whole thing. I left, and we went and drove out by Okemah Lake, and I pulled off my fake eyelashes and just cried my eyes out. It was just so much emotion that I had to, had to have an outlet.
To get that out. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's the question that I don't know. I get all sorts of reactions to this because it's kind of a hard question. But what do you think your body of work so far represents?
Well, I've thought about that, and I've heard other people's interpretations. I think when I look at Ezekiel's wheels and I put it next to It's Not That Hard To, and then I put it next to Now I Lay Me Down, and I think about some common themes that run through it. I think about my passion for this place where my people came and decided that this is where we want to raise our children. Oklahoma, which is a conflict too, because I gripe about Oklahoma all the time. But there's that. It's a love letter. My work is a love letter to Oklahoma. And my fourth book is going to be one more. Hope maybe someday. I think it was Faulkner that said that you leave and then you spend the rest of your life writing about the home that you left. Something like that. That's a loose quote. But definitely dark love letters to my home that I love, and the connection through family, loyalty. And I think in a way, it's me working out psychologically the idea of how one person feels like they can own or take another person's spirit, in whether that's slavery or murder or a march across the South in the winter. How does that happen, that a human being can feel like they can take that from another human? So I think that's what I'm working out in all of these, and I haven't figured it out yet.
Well,
I don't know the answer.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Well, I think that's great. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about your creative process. So I'm sure each book is different, but in general, how do you go through that first impulse or idea for a story, write it, and then know that it's finished and ready to send out?
Well, with all of my books, they are all handwritten first.
Oh, really?
Yes. I have a thing with composition books. So, and this isn't typical, but usually I'll have a composition book that's like recycled. It kind of feels like this, you know, this paper, and I'll just write from. What I like to do is start writing at 10 a.m. I'm not really a morning person. In the morning, I like to be quiet, and I like to take in. So I like to read the Bible. I like to read whatever book I'm reading. I like to drink my coffee, and I like quiet and peace. And then at 10 o'clock, I'll start writing, and I'm writing by hand. And a good day, on a really good day, I can write 4,000 words in 4 hours. But usually what I'm shooting for is 2,000 good words from 10 to 2. And so with all 3 books, I will have already written a good chunk of it, not half, but a good chunk of the book. And then I'm starting to get some structure in my brain, so I can make a skeleton of an outline of the book, so that when I write something, I can put it in a category, because I don't write in order. So I think I wrote the end of Ezekiel's Wheels first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then I had to go back and fill in the blanks. But I write it all by hand, and then my first part of the editing process is then I type it onto my laptop or whatever. And so I'm editing as I'm transferring from the written page onto the typed page. And I actually really write in scenes. So I'll write a scene, and then when I'm towards the end of the book, then I have to go back and make all of these transitions. And that's the real work, because the scenes are when I don't know. I don't know really what to attribute it to, but
Mm-hmm.
something is happening where I'm not conscious of what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's flowing through me, whatever the story is. It's flowing
Mm-hmm.
through me. I'm writing it. And I'll go back and read it later, and I can't believe I wrote it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a trance-like state.
Mm-hmm.
And then the real work of writing a book, anybody can do that trance-like state.
Yeah.
It's flowing through you and it's fun. The real work of being a writer is when you have to go back and do the tedious
Mm-hmm.
work of piecing everything together.
Yeah.
That really sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time you've edited, so say like Now I Lay Me Down, I probably read it after I finished it. I sent it out to, I think, 6 or 7 really smart friends who are
Mm-hmm.
all very well read, highly intelligent. And I just tell them to tear it up, you know,
Mm-hmm.
break my heart, go ahead.
Yeah.
Because any kind of criticism about what you write is going to break your heart because
Yeah.
it's your baby.
Mm-hmm.
It's your baby. It's somebody's telling you that your baby's ugly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really painful. But I do trust these people that they're going to tell me the truth. And then after I get the feedback from those edits, then I go back and I've probably edited this book. Maybe I probably edited it 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a professional editor with Ezekiel's Wills, but I didn't have one for Now I Lay Me Down. So it's been edited. And so by the time I'm done with it,
Mm-hmm.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it so much.
know.
I never want to look at it again. And that's when you know it's time to publish,
Mm-hmm.
or at least for me,
Yeah.
is when I can't stand to read another word of it. Then I'm like, okay, I'm done. It's got to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you're never going to be perfect. You can't be perfect, but you can be done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the best feelings as a writer, which I've only felt a few times, but when you're able to let that thing go and
Mm-hmm.
close the book
Right.
and move on to the next one, it's such a good feeling.
So what's the best writing advice that you could give to other writers or that someone has given you?
Really, I think that the best writing advice is that you need to be reading
Mm-hmm.
really good work every day. You need to be taking in really good work every day and let it process in your brain. Go to sleep at night and have dreams about it, and then wake
Mm-hmm.
up the next day and not that you're regurgitating that work, but just that magic
Mm-hmm.
of really high, great literature is steeping in your brain, and then it's going to improve your output for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah. So how can we encourage writers in Oklahoma to keep going, keep creating, and recognize that this is a good place to create art and literature?
Well, I speak to young writers a lot in the public schools,
Mm-hmm.
and you can always really kind of see I can always tell who the writer is.
Yeah.
Because they're just a little bit different. But it delights me, and it's one of the best parts of what I do is to be able to speak to young writers. And I would say my friend that I spoke of earlier, Steve Ripley, when
Mm-hmm.
I told him that I was going to publish this book and that I was going to give my life to writing and that's what I wanted to do, he didn't discourage me, but he
Mm-hmm.
just said, this is the quote, "Art ain't easy." And I love
Yeah.
that because
Yeah.
it hasn't been, it's not. And you have
Right.
to recognize when you set out to do this that you're going to have to give up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a life of sacrifice. And I'm 10 years in and I'm
Mm-hmm.
just now. So, I told my son, it's going to be 1 year
Mm-hmm.
of struggle. And I'm 10 years in, 3 books in, and I'm just now getting to the point where I'm getting some recognition in the press.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still haven't been covered by the Tulsa World or the Daily Oklahoman. They published when I made it onto the bestseller list,
Right.
but they haven't reviewed the book, and I was frustrated by that.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say, whatever, if you want to write, it's a terrible book and it's crappy and by this independent writer, that's fine, but at least acknowledge. I mean,
Right.
It was a big case in Oklahoma, but I don't want to sound like sour grapes either.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever, maybe maybe next year.
Yeah.
But I'm in contention for the Oklahoma Book Award.
Oh,
I've submitted my work to be considered. So maybe if I make a finalist, then maybe we'll get some attention in the two big papers in the state. The little towns have been all over it. You know, they're excited about it, and and the readers have reacted very passionately.
Yeah, that's definitely the hard part about being a writer in Oklahoma too, is that recognition of our own who are here.
Well, I think that's what's so vital about Oklahoma writers is that there's nobody else that can tell a story.
Right.
There's nobody that knows this area like we do. So there's no one who can come in and tell the story better than we can. And ultimately, my dad had said something about his vineyard. He said that it made him feel good. He knew that he was one day going to die and then eventually be forgotten. And he said, it does make me feel wonderful to know that when I'm gone and possibly even forgotten, that these vines are still going to be here. So there's like this element of your work that you've put in the earth that's going to live on far beyond when you're gone. And I feel the same way about the books. It's this thing that I've planted and I've given myself to these books, and when I croak, they'll still be they'll still be going. Yeah. So there's something very romantic about that to me.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. So what are you working on currently?
I'm so excited about what I'm working on currently. And I have something interesting to show you that's in connection with it. But so when I moved back in 2011 to start this writing thing, my sister had taken my nephew to the creek, Peachooter Creek. And they were walking along the banks, and my nephew found a bone. And he said, Aunt Melissa, she's the baby sister, and she's a nurse. Both of my sisters are nurses. Is this a human bone? And she said, oh, no, because, you know, out here in the country, we find cow bones and stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And so he kept picking up these pieces of bone and asking my sister, his aunt, about it. And finally, she recognized a possible bone that she thought only a human, well, I think it was a clavicle bone. And so she kind of she didn't want to upset my nephew, but she went and got a bucket, put all these bones in a bucket, went to my mom and dad's house in Proctor, laid this black cloth in the floor, and took out all these bones in our anatomy book and started piecing these bones together. And this is what she came up with.
Oh,
this is an actual picture of what my sister pieced together in the floor of my parents' home. No head, no hands, no feet, but possibly an actual human skeleton. We don't know, but it looks like it.
Yeah.
So
it does.
My sister my dad, they put the bones back in a bucket, and my dad called the local officials, and they came and picked up this guy.
Yeah.
And we never heard from him again.
Huh.
And that was 7 years ago. 8 years ago. They never went to look where the bones were found. We don't know if they confirmed that it was a human or not. All we know is they came and took the bones, and we never heard another word back. So this is after Ezekiel's Wheels. This got my creative juices just, set me on fire. And so I started writing the story of this person who was found on the banks, and it incorporates all of these incredible stories that I've heard about the men in my family. You know, every year we go and we have like a catfish camp at the lake or on the river, and our whole family gets together and we tell stories. And I've heard so many fantastic, incredible stories from my family, and I put that flesh on these bones, and that's what my fourth book is me telling the story of this guy that they found on the creek. And I think it's going to be called Jacob as well, but I don't know for sure yet.
Okay.
But it's definitely, I would say, in the realm of magical realism.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I saw the Marquez. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about that we haven't covered? Hurry up.
I mean, I've told you a lot, haven't I?
Yeah. There's no time limit. So
let me make sure that I made a couple notes, but I think I told you everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I mean, we even went through influences and everything, didn't we? So, yeah. I think I told you the whole story.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Faith. It's such a pleasure.
It's been so much fun.
Yeah.
And you fit in the Ozark foothills. Yeah. So you'll have to come back and...
Yeah, it's beautiful out here.
Yeah, you'll have to come back to the vineyard one day.
Mm-hmm. I will.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.